What's up, guys? This is Travis Bogard with Above the Rest Training Systems here in Cheyenne, where we make you strong to elevate your game. We're bringing you another video. This one is a deadlift variation targeting your ability to break the bar off the floor. It's called the Deficit Paused Deadlift. In this video, we're going to show you how to perform the Deficit Paused Deadlift, some of the common mistakes that we see when we see it performed here at Above the Rest Training Systems, and a few ways that you can incorporate it into your own program. Let's go ahead and get started. When you're going to perform the deficit pause deadlift, one of the things I want you to focus on is that this isn't necessarily a deficit deadlift for the sake of a deficit deadlift. What we're working here is your ability to break the bar off the floor by forcing you into this tight setup position almost from a hover. You're gonna pull the bar off the ground and then pause where the bar would normally be in a conventional deadlift. So whereas in a conventional pull, you have the floor to support you, in this variation, the floor is almost removed. That being said, since that's the point, you don't need a massive deficit. Even a ½ inch to an inch is gonna be fine. You're just gonna wanna make sure that it's high enough that the bar's actually floating off the ground when you go to execute that pause. If you're using an excessively whippy bar, you might have to go up a little higher to get the same training effect. To actually achieve the pause, we're gonna try to do it by forming a lot of tightness and then sitting back into the setup. Some of the cues that I like to focus in on are pulling the slack out of the bar, hear that click and then hold the bar there, putting in the tension between your arm and the bar. Whatever cue works best for you to build that tightness in the setup is the one that you need to be focusing on. Once you have that tightness, we're gonna use it to sit back into the deadlift and pry the bar off the floor. Once you've held that position, simply perform a pull as you would with all of the other cues that you know and love to keep your form solid. Keep in mind that this isn't a variation that's necessarily specific to a barbell. For our Strongman viewers, you can do this with an axle, you can do this from an elevated position, even if you're struggling to build a setup off of wagon wheels or a silver dollar. You can even do this with implements if you're struggling to break them off the ground. One of the most common mistakes that we see here at Above the Rest Training Systems happens when the athlete comes out of the pause to perform the rest of the pull. Typically when they initiate that force and they go to get into the actual deadlift portion of the exercise, they try to do it so explosively that they end up extending their knees earlier than they extend their hips, and we get kind of that butt swoop pattern out the back. There's a couple cues that work for this. You know, you can have patience, slow down the bar. One of my favorites is try to make your hips lock out before your knees. It's physically not possible. If our hips locked out before our knees did, we'd be falling backwards. But if we try and we cue that in our brain, usually everything snaps together at the right time. The second common issue that we see with this deadlift variation also happens again after the pause when we initiate the deadlift. What'll happen is that the athlete will try to explode with more force than their brace can sustain. The lats will come apart and we'll start to see some rounding of the upper back. To avoid this, again, take your time as you transition from the pause into the deadlift. The entire point of this exercise is to firm up your technique. If we initiate that pull doing anything wonky, it kind of defeats the purpose. The last mistake we see is typically happening right there when we go to pull the bar off the floor for the first time into the pause. A lot of athletes will build all of that tension and then they're gonna sit almost too low into the pull, trying to get it broken off the floor. What we want to see the athlete do is get all of their tightness and then sit back and almost use their body like a crowbar to get that bar pried off the floor. The cue that we really like for this is to almost imagine that you're performing a trust fall after you get that tightness. If we think instead about falling backwards instead of sitting down under the bar, typically that's going to get that tightness that we need to then pry the bar off the floor and initiate the rest of the deadlift. Our favorite place to put this into an athlete's program is as a max effort movement. We'll use it as a technical overload movement, basically going until the technique itself breaks down or form falls apart. When that happens, we'll get the athlete a second shot at that weight. If they fail technically again, they're done for the day. If we wave these technical overload movements together, then by the time we hit week 4, week 5, week 6, we should really see a lot of improvement in this specific exercise and a lot of strength gain and eventually a plateau. Then we'll move into the next max effort variation. Keep in mind that there's inherent variability to this variation. The length of the pause can be changed and really make this exercise even more dramatic. The difference between holding that pause for 2 seconds and 5 seconds is really gonna get the athlete thinking, and it might be necessary to give them time to think and feel out that position. The second place that we like this exercise variation is kind of daisy chained on top of other variations that we're already doing. Over the last few weeks, we've been posting a couple of other deadlift variations to the YouTube channel. Things like the knee pull to deadlift complex and the no touch deadlift. Both of those can be incorporated in with the deficit paused deadlift for even more technical work breaking the bar off the floor. These variations can become very, very powerful in a program when an athlete does struggle off the floor. The last place that we like to program this exercise is as part of the warm-up. If an athlete's been through a long block and has just recently made this big adaptation and improved a ton breaking the bar off the floor, we can lose some of that if we don't continue to maintain it in the program. If we go straight back to regular conventional pulling techniques, pulling from the floor, even from blocks, but without any focus to that point off the floor, we run the risk of that adaptation decaying. Incorporating the deficit paused deadlift into the warm-up is a good way of cementing that adaptation and increasing the likelihood that it sustains itself from one block to the next. This is another one of the exercise variations that we love to use in our Odin's Boys Strongman programming. If you haven't already, be sure to check that out. There's a link in the description. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. We got a lot more exercise variation and content coming your way. You don't want to miss it. We'll catch you in the next video.